Every generation brings with it a fair share of excellent characters. For today's installment of Once in a Generation, we've looked at the top 10 best new characters to arrive and define this generation of consoles. For this list, we're considering games that released originally on the PlayStation 4 generation, and we're only accepting one character per entry. Let's get started. At first, Jack Baker may seem like a typical stalker enemy in Resident Evil. With the series known for the tyrant Mr. X or Nemesis, it would make sense that the latest entry, which brought the series back to its roots, would feature another stalker. Primarily hunting Ethan in the first third of the game, Jack Baker is unique within Resident Evil, because unlike Mr. X or Nemesis, Baker is a human, twisted and enhanced due to the situation, but human nonetheless. He taunts Ethan, mocks him, and plays with him psychologically. Jack wouldn't make this list if that's all he was, though. Going beyond the series trope, it's revealed that Jack's sentience is more than skin deep, being cognizant of his own, and more importantly his family's, descent into madness, yet helpless to escape. Jack is humanized. As Ethan said, Jack and his family were victims of bioterror as much as he was, making the story of the Bakers one of the most tragic arcs in the main series. Ghost of Tsushima uses many of its characters to portray the different paths people can take in terms of dealing with a dangerous situation. In this case, the Mongol invasion of Tsushima Island. Lord Shimura is the traditional samurai path, Jin takes up the ghost path, and Jin's childhood friend Ryutso has a very complicated path. What we find admirable about Ryutso is that his motivations and intentions were never truly evil, in spite of his actions, to reach his ultimate goal. All Ryutso ever wanted was to feed his men and provide a safe haven of stability for them in the fight against the Mongols. And after Jin and the samurai failed to do that, Khotun Khan of the Mongols did. In a game so focused on multiple characters who stray from the path they have led throughout their entire lives, Ryutso not only works as a foil to Jin, but also provides one of the best set pieces in the game. For the overwhelming majority of its life, the God of War series rarely showed human elements to Kratos, and if it ever was, it was shown as a weak point in comparison to his godly nature. God of War 2018 came along with a new perspective in multiple ways, one of the most important ones being his son, Petraeus. While not being Kratos' first child, Petraeus was far and away the most impactful character on the God of War in terms of reshaping him from a monster to a father. Petraeus is the conduit that allows Kratos the ability to teach something more than rage, anguish, and tragedy. Playing through the game, we see Kratos teach Atreus patience, strength, and goodness, all traits that Kratos rarely honed in his past. Along with Atreus himself being a strong character in terms of seeing his growth from innocent to selfish to selfless, the promise of more from Atreus' story is something exciting that we hope to see come to fruition in God of War Ragnarok. And maybe one day we get to see him shapeshift into an animal and see what his godhood is like. Star Wars is such a dense universe, brimming with countless memorable characters, that it might be hard for any newcomer to stand out. Thankfully, Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order introduced a whole cast of likable characters, but it's Cal Kestis specifically who is the standout character of the game. From the narrative in the present to some excellent flashback sequences, we see a hesitant adolescent take his steps to reclaim his identity as a Jedi. Cal carries the guilt of his failed apprenticeship throughout the story. He faces that guilt head-on and learns from his past as a means to dictate his future. What's particularly noteworthy about Cal is that despite everything that happens, he never loses his faith in people. Cal still believes in everyone, whether it's a fallen Jedi or a vindictive witch, and he builds that faith into powerful relationships. Even though he's only had one story, Cal is clearly worthy of the Jedi title. Horizon Zero Dawn was one of the more notable new IP for the PS4 generation, thanks to Guerrilla Games. On top of everything it brought to the table, it added a new face of PlayStation in the form of Aloy. Aloy is portrayed by Ashley Burch, a veteran of the industry at this point, and the weight of her name certainly translated to the character as a whole. Her intrigue and wonder of the world before her time perfectly align with the player's desire to explore and learn more alongside her as you play. The character does a great job at portraying her struggles in a way the player can relate to, despite with the backdrop of the future United States ravaged by metal animal-like machines. With a sequel coming to PlayStation 5 soon, Horizon Zero Dawn laid a great foundation to see where the Forbidden West takes Aloy, not only physically, but emotionally as well. Death Stranding has an excellent cast and a fantastic pool of characters, from Mama, Die Hardman to Sam Porter Bridges. However, we found that Higgs is a very unique and outstanding character among this cast. Modeled and acted by Troy Baker, you may walk into the game knowing what to expect because of his name, but the antagonist that is Higgs is what sold us. Troy Baker is usually a hero. We rarely get to see him be evil. Every time the character appears, he has grand monologues of ill intentions and motives. Higgs' actions and movements when he appears on screen are charming. Taking that into account and seeing the deeds he actually does makes him all the more horrifying. It's clear inside and out from the gold mask, black tears, and forehead inscriptions that Higgs is a bad person. But you can't help craving to hear more of what he has to say. Abby had everything working against her. Initially poised as the vengeful antagonist of The Last of Us Part 2, Abby was quickly vilified by players in the early hours of the game. It isn't until her purposely long, playable section of the game that the brilliance of her character shines through. We pick up with Abby after she completes her years-long quest of revenge, and she feels just as empty as ever. Her problems don't vanish after the job is done, as she experiences nightmares of her moment of trauma for days. This all changes, however, when she meets Lev and Yara. The hardened exterior she crafted over the past few years begins to fade into the background. Abby slowly begins to care, except now she focuses on rehabilitation rather than revenge. By the game's end, you start to sympathize more with Abby than you do with Ellie, who finds herself in a similar place Abby was at the start of the game. Naughty Dog's inclusion and focus on Abby in The Last of Us Part 2 was incredibly risky, but thanks to her complex narrative arc, Abby shines through as the best new character in the game. Fire Emblem Three Houses offers many different paths, and within each path, a diverse cast of characters. One can make a case for many of the characters in this bunch, but none stand above the rest quite like Edelgard von Fressfeld. Edelgard is the class leader of the Black Eagles. She's studious, cares about her work and her friends, and she seems like she may fill in specific tropes that one would expect from this type of story. However, like with many characters in the game, the more you work with your students, the more you train them and teach them, and help them in their own personal struggles, the more layers you peel back about their character. Learning of her past, the pressures she has on her as the heir to the Adrestian Empire, discovering her haunting stories of surviving abuse, and seeing her come into her own, taking agency and making actions to benefit herself, her friends, her family, and her people, fighting alongside her as she leads her classmates and the player to victory, ushering in a new era of freedom into the continent of Fodlan. We get to see Edelgard grow into the leader she's always been destined to be. Much like the characters in the universe that step into the shoes of their ancestors through the Animus, the protagonist of an Assassin's Creed game is very important, as they follow a long history of characters like Ezio, Edward Kenway, or Bayek. Assassin's Creed Odyssey releasing with a choice of one of two protagonists, Alexios or Cassandra, gave many people pause as to wonder what the differences would be between these two characters. And with the option of dialogue choices being implemented into the story, there was some doubt that it would be able to pull off a compelling narrative and make this character feel unique and their own. Luckily, Ubisoft not only delivered on the story front, but they also delivered one of the best assassins in the franchise so far, rivaling Ezio and Cassandra. Cassandra has all the charm and swagger that one loves from characters like Ezio in the Assassin's Creed series, with her own distinct personality, giving players the freedom to choose how she tackles situations, being brutal, flirty, or tactical. The performance of Cassandra grounds her to feel like a true human. Seeing her accomplish menial tasks or grand adventures is rewarding, just because you get to see more of her interact with this world that has been so richly crafted by Ubisoft. Just like everyone else in his gang, Arthur Morgan is an outlaw. He steals and kills to survive, but his identity is so much more complex than that. Arthur is a nuanced character, with so much heart that players universally loved him. Dutch might call the shots, but it's Arthur that the gang looks up to. He's the spiritual leader of the group who makes sure everyone is okay despite the countless setbacks they encounter. At around the halfway point of the game, Arthur undergoes a life-changing experience that causes him to really reflect on his life. From that point onward, he dedicates himself to helping the gang live peaceful lives outside of their life of crime. He succeeds for a few, and they never forget him because of it. This is especially evident in John Marston, who grows from a careless man at the game's beginning into a thoughtful husband and father by the game's end thanks to Arthur. He sees the potential in John, and he helps steer him in the right direction for the sake of John's family. Despite his criminal ways, Arthur Morgan is a considerate, noble man, and he's our pick for the #1 new character this generation.
So, while the rest of us are busy stealing, killing, lying, fighting to try to survive, you get to think all day.
So there you have it. Those are the top 10 best characters of this generation. Be sure to let us know what you think of our picks down below in the comments. And if you stuck around this long and you're new to the channel and you enjoyed, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe so you don't miss future lists like our next one, the top 10 games of the generation. We are very close to 2,000 subscribers and we would love to hit that milestone before next gen hits. If you'd like to get involved further in the channel, consider going to patreon.com/joyclicks. where for $1, $2, or $5 you can get a variety of tiers, including producer credit, like Aaron Easton and Chris Sakis. We hope you've enjoyed the road so far, and are excited as we are about finally closing the chapter on this generation.